Well, welcome to our last coffee with the principal, or principals, I should say. It has been quite the year, right? Some highs, some welcome. Hi, come on in. Some challenges, some opportunities to grow. But I'm really fortunate to work with Jennifer Sasai so closely and to do these coffees together. Because we have quite a few parents, families, students, that go to Walker or have students there that come over to Kennedy. So we really tried to work on that relationship building and just bridging a little bit of that transition from middle school to high school.
Our goal really is to be a truly 6-year school. So next year we will host all of our coffee chats together, and we look forward to doing learning walks and different opportunities for you all to see both of our schools and highlight our programs, especially our AI exclusive pathway.
Then we'll also continue to do our presentations as needed separately. So if there's something that is more geared towards our seniors with financial aid, college and career readiness, we did some presentations this year with our middle school, but there are certain things that cater more to our students at the high school level. There are some things that cater more towards middle school. So we'll continue to have things that are just naturally separate. But then also combine certain presentations. There are certain things that we need to cover, like today's presentation for middle school and high school.
So if you can believe it, we only have 9 days of school left. Just for your reference, school does end on May 25th.
Correct.
And so for the high schools, there's 2 minimum days, that Wednesday and Thursday. For Walker, we have our last day of school, which is the minimum day, and it's our 8th grade activities. So we have a party for the students and an assembly. School does start on August 9th for planning purposes, just so you know, and registration will be in the summer. So we'll have more information on that. But without further ado, we want to pass it along to Walker's social worker, Miss Crystal Kim. We are so fortunate that both of our schools have a full-time social worker to work with our students on our social and emotional health. So Ms. Crystal is amazing, so I'd like to turn it over to her now. So thank you, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Crystal Kim. I am the social worker at Walker Junior High School. For my Korean families, we Walker Junior High School and social worker. And that's as much Korean I'll do for now because we have our amazing undercard translating in the back, but I wanted to show my Korean families. So today I'm going to be kind of presenting about mental health, and because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And we'll specifically be talking about how to foster resiliency in your childhood. And before we begin, I want to kind of note that everything that we do here at the district is rooted in our district's core values. So if we could just take a moment and look at our core values and think to ourselves, which one sticks out to you today, which one is speaking to you today. And here is an overview of our objectives. So like I said before, it's going to be all things mental health as much as I can fit into one presentation. But we're going to be going over the difference between mental health and mental illness. We're going to be going over risk and protective factors and how short and long-term benefits of taking care of your mental health and strategies to foster resilience. Also, how to seek support and how to seek help. Okay, so first things first, what is the difference between mental health and mental illness? Oh, and please stop me anytime if you have any questions. I will be kind of asking with the audience for your feedback and questions as we go along. I like this to be as interactive as possible. So I encourage questions anytime. But the difference between mental health and mental illness is mental health is the ability to cope with stressors, kind of you hear the term self-care. This is to, really take the time and dedicate it to take care of yourself, check in with yourself. This can look very different for many people. And mental health is where you're just taking care of your entire well-being. It transitions into mental illness when you see a decline in daily functioning. This can look different, and we'll go over this in a little bit, but it can look different in the home, it can look different in school, in the community, things like that. But a mental illness, it shifts to mental illness once there's a diagnosable mental health diagnosis. So to kind of go off of what I was saying before, you can see mental health kind of on this continuum, right? So green is where we want to be. Green is, taking care of ourselves and naturally kind of having the coping skills to get through stressful things. So whether it's stressful things at school, home, work, etc., most of us have the ability to cope with these stressors. That's the green zone. Minimal mental health, yellow zone. This is kind of like where you experience some nerves, anxiety about maybe different stressors. For example, I was really anxious about this presentation today. That is natural kind of anxiety, but I was still able to come up here and do what I needed to do. Maybe you can relate at work if you have a deadline, or a lot of students, when they have presentations, they come and they're like, Ms. Crystal, I don't think I can do it. So things like that, that's like the yellow zone. This is still a little bit normal, but a little bit, it's overwhelming, but they can still push past it. So the orange and red zone, these are usually the students that I meet with at school that will probably be referred to the social worker at Canada as well. And these are students that their symptoms of mental illness or their anxiety, depression, things like that, it's very overwhelming and it's getting in the way of their daily tasks in their everyday life. Can anybody give me an example if they've seen something like other than what's on here, something that's not on here that's in the orange or red zone?
Inability to focus on one thing at a time.
Yes. Difficulty concentrating and focusing, that's a big one. That's common in our kids as well. Yes. Anything else?
I was gonna go with, but it says isolation, avoiding social events, withdrawing.
Yes.
So if you see that your child normally likes to socialize and then changes that to like completely withdraw, that could be some sort of
Yes.
stressor.
And she said something very key is a dramatic shift in the behavior is a key in determining whether, maybe something's going on with my child and I need to kind of check in and seek support. Okay. Next slide, please. So just kind of an overview of kind of the statistics to show you how needed it is for mental health support and kind of why we do the work that we do. For example, suicide is the second leading cause of death in people ages 10 to 34. So that's the community that we work with. So it's really scary, but suicide is the second leading cause of death. Just another one is, 1 in 6 youth will develop a mental health disorder within each year. So it is getting more and more common. I have seen just a decline in mental illness like since COVID and the pandemic as well. So this is a very serious, we're in a mental health crisis, right? Yes, please. Okay. So now I'm going to kind of go over some risk factors for mental illness. Risk factors are kind of generally, if these things are going on, it can lead to mental illness, but it does not mean that it will lead to mental illness. If your family, if your child has the right tools, the right strategies to build themselves up, that's gonna be something that we talk about later, a protective factor to prevent kind of mental illness. So, in the community, a risk factor could be poverty, gang violence. Can anybody else think of something in the community that could be a risk factor? A stressor that you've seen? Communities a little tough.
Abuse, domestic violence.
Yes, yeah, witnessing that like as well. Okay, now moving on to the school community and peers. A risk factor that we see kind of often is lack of school involvement. So getting your child involved in things within the campus is really important, so they have that sense of community. Learning difficulties could be another risk factor. So kind of like what you were saying, like difficulty concentrating, right? If you're not getting it, that can be very overwhelming for a kid and a student during this time. Anybody else can think of something that can be a risk factor within the school, within the peers?
There's peer pressure,
Yes.
and then also any type of bullying or cyberbullying.
Yes. Cyberbullying, bullying, that's a big one as well, and peer pressure, especially in this age group. Anybody else? Okay, let's move on to the family. So risk factors in the family, divorce is a common one, domestic violence as well, visible kind of any kind of abuse, financial struggles could be a factor. Anybody else want to shout out some things that they think is a risk factor that could be present in his family?
Maybe moving, like
Yes.
moving and stuff.
Yes, moving, like a big move, or even just moving like to a different school, like that's a big change for students right now.
Lots of jobs.
Lots of jobs in the home, yes, that's a big one that happened during COVID.
Lots of loved ones.
Yes, loss of loved one, that's a big one as well. Grief is a big one that we see and we meet with the students often as well. Hey, that was awesome, thank you. And within the individual, some risk factors could be just medical or health problems. Dealing with that kind of on a daily basis is a very stressful thing for a student or a child. Having poor coping skills, so not knowing what to do to get through difficult times, and sometimes even developmental delays could also be a risk factor. Anybody want to shout out some individual kind of factors that they think could be risk factors?
Do you mean like low self-esteem or low
Yeah.
self-confidence?
Yeah, perfect, you transitioned me perfect. We go on to the next slide. So what does poor mental health look like in kids? So we separated it into 4 categories. There's cognitive, emotional, physical, and behavioral. As what was just said, cognitive, what we see a lot in our adolescents is low self-esteem. So this is the negative self-talk, especially kind of in our younger girls, like especially junior high. I can speak for junior high, like these girls just really struggle with empowering themselves, thinking positively about themselves. And they like this will look like, oh, like I don't look good, I'm fat, I'm dumb, like I hear this. They can think of all the bad things about themselves before they can think of the good things, which is really sad. Emotional, oh, sorry. Emotional, this kind of looks like, if you see your child crying very often, like crying spells, this can look like panic attacks, like anxiety, and not being able to control that. And it could even look like anger, like angry outbursts, like whether it's getting into a fight with peers or adults or siblings at home. This is kind of the emotional sector. For physical, this kind of looks like sleep habits. So if your child is sleeping too much or sleeping too little, it can look like a sudden increase in weight or sudden decrease in weight. This could look like physically having a panic attack, like difficulty breathing, like and maybe shaking of the body. So those are just kind of physical symptoms that we see in our children. And behaviorally, I think we've kind of talked about, they might be outbursts in class that you haven't seen before. There might be outbursts at home that you haven't seen before, whether it's with their peers, siblings, you, things like that. That's something to look out for. Also, on the opposite end is isolation. So not wanting to get out of their room, really avoiding school and refusing to come to school, not wanting to engage like in family dinners or something like that anymore. That's what it can kind of look like. All right, so let's take a moment to kind of pause and reflect. I want to hear from you, our parents, what thoughts come to mind or emotions come to mind when you think about your child, potentially struggling with their mental health, or have you experienced this before? Any brave souls?
I just want to say that it's kind of difficult because of all that you said. I could put a check on all of them, right? Because they're teenagers, so they do all of that. I just think that maybe like a sudden change is what would be kind of the, the alert.
Yeah, a sudden change. And if you can check the box on all of them, but you feel like it might be because the teenage aspect, right?
Like he doesn't want to have dinner with me, he's aggressive, and then sometimes he's sad, sometimes he's
Yeah, but that brings it back to, is it impairing his daily function? Right,
No.
is it impairing, so there you go, that means that the normal kind of hormones is totally normal. But being able to bring it back, and if he's still able to go on about his day-to-day without there being a true disruption, that means he has the skills to bring it back, and that means you're doing a great job.
Bring up, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
We, like as parents, have been educated on how to protect our kids from society. There's a lot of like things that you have kids that you do to try and keep them safe. And it's always being promoted of how we can protect them from outside sources of harm. But this is all new to us as parents, because there isn't a lot of information of how do we protect our kids from themselves. They're in their bedroom and they're safe, but yet they're struggling and we don't know how to identify it, and we don't. So that to me is one of the biggest fears, is like, I can protect them from society, but how do I protect them from themselves? Because if they wanted to hurt themselves and you poured yourself into them your whole entire life and they're by themselves, that's when you're talking about one of the biggest fears and frustration. That's the problem with mental illness, is that we don't have the skills or understanding of how we can identify.
Yeah, and that's why we have these presentations, and that's why you being here and learning about this is absolutely key, because we were not taught this growing up or in school, So it's really hard to be able to identify that. But, just really actively checking in with your kid. I think the big thing to take away is if you see that sudden change and you feel like, something's not right, having that conversation with them or reaching out for support. That's why we have mental health support here at school, to be able to identify kids that, are truly hurting, to protect them from themselves. So thank you.
And some students can completely just mask, right? Anything that is going on that you saw on the previous slide so well. And so I think it's important to also know, like, okay, then if that's what's happening, are there certain questions that we should be asking? I know that we have been trained in, doing a threat assessment or a suicide assessment, for example, where you literally have to ask the student if they have thoughts of harming themselves, if they have a plan, which as a parent, I can see how scary that could be, that I have to ask that question. So I think through the presentation and maybe afterward, we should talk kind of about those things as well. It's like, what if my child looks on the outside, you know, like everything's going well and fine and they're functioning, but how do I know if there is something? Is there another indicator of something else that will reveal, you know, to me that there is something else going on?
Yeah. And we do see that a lot as well. Our high achieving students, like sometimes are struggling the most with anxiety, but their anxiety is just pushing them to kind of do more and they're struggling so much inside. The internalizers are very hard to kind of assess and catch, but that goes with, we'll kind of talk about, it's like we read this.
Wrote them.
At the end, I'll kind of give you some talking points to have to kind of do daily check-ins with your child to really try to see what's going on instead of just, how was your day? You know, there's more questions that you can ask to see what's going on with them and have those difficult conversations. And I'll also be here after if you have more specific questions on suicide, like assessment, things like that.
I have a question, talking about suicide ever, push them to commit suicide or?
Talking about it will help prevent it. Yeah, that's a very valid fear.
And that's like a
And
myth
it's
that
a very big myth that people have. They're like, oh, if I talk about it, then I'm gonna give them the idea to do it. But no, you have to, not addressing it is the worst thing possible for a student who is, you know, really struggling with suicidal ideation. Any other questions? Thank you guys, this is so engaging.
I love all the participation because this is such a huge topic, especially after the pandemic. How many students we personally see that have mental health issues where we've never seen before.
Next slide, please. So this goes on, we talk a lot about risk factors. Now I want to kind of change over to the protective factors. What can you do with your child to build up their coping, build up their mental health, things like that. A big one, I mean, I'm not gonna read this list here, and I'm gonna ask you guys to share as well, but a big one that is being involved in the community, whether it's being involved in school, being involved in outside sports, something, finding their passion and kind of allowing them to have that safe space. So I think safe space is number one, right? So having a safe space is very, very important for a team. And that can sometimes be their room, that can sometimes be the gym, that can sometimes be like a specific classroom where they have a community of friends that they love and cherish and can talk to. It looks but really pushing your child to find that safe place, find that sense of community is, in my opinion, the biggest kind of protective factor. Does anybody else want to kind of shout out some things that they think are protective factors that's not really kind of listed here, or highlight one of the ones that they've noted that works for their child? Also therapy, I want to highlight that. Therapy is very important. I know that there's also a stigma in getting your child kind of in therapy. There's even a stigma when I work with students and I try and get them linked to outside therapy. They're like, I don't need to see a therapist. I'm like, well, you've been meeting with me and it's kind of the same thing. What is like, they think that therapy means that they're going to be in a hospital and that they're like mental, right? There's still this big stigma with mental illness and therapy and misconception. So pushing and being open, creating your own therapy as a parent and sharing that with your kid could be really, really powerful. And then being like, oh wow, like my parent is taking care of their mental health. Like that means, you know, I can't do it. And this is just kind of a short list of short-term and long-term benefits of pushing your child to take care of their mental health. You know, this can be someone with, you know, good mental health, taking care of themselves, good coping skills. They will have, you know, higher academic performance. They will have, you know, more resiliency. They will have better problem solving skills. So, future employability is good. And, the lower kind of effects would be, it would lower risk of self-harm and suicidality. It would lower the risk of peer pressure, substance use. A child that is secure in themselves are more likely to say, no, I'm good, on things like that as well. And most importantly, I kind of want to leave this down because that teens report that their parents have the greatest influence over their risk behaviors, more than friends, more than siblings, or the media. So as parents, you guys hold the power. You hold the power to really make that change and build your kids up. I know that's kind of a loaded like term, but this has been reported that their parents are what make the difference. And even with my work and students, I really try my best to always engage the parents to do practice the stuff that we are learning at home, because if that learning is not mimicked at home, there's really not going to be a change. And I can say that like with absolute certainty, my kids who have gone from really, you know, in that red zone have been lifted up because of the work that the parents have done at home, that we kind of collaborated together. So how do we do this? How do we empower our children? And how do we have those difficult conversations? It's, you know, one thing that I think is very important is teaching your child how to navigate difficult times. So I know that it was mentioned kind of grief and loss, right? How do you teach a child to handle that intense emotion of loss and grief? A lot of it is they mimic what they see in their parents. So one thing is, you know, I know that a lot of families, when they're going through difficult times, they try and mask their emotions to be like, oh, I'm going to stay strong. Like, you know, you have to stay strong through this. But that's not true to, you know, build their resiliency. It's okay to show that emotion to your child. It's better, in fact, because they will know that it's okay to cry. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be like all those things, and know that, you know, my parent will help me through that. Like I can show this and still I'll be okay. And that teaches them to release that intense emotion in a safe way, so that they don't hold it all in, because that's very detrimental as well. Someone who holds everything in, like we talked about before, and they're so good at masking it until one day they kind of like break. That's what we don't want. So showing emotion to your kids and walking them through it, like, yeah, like mom's really sad right now. I'm really upset, but I'll be okay because we have each other. Or, you know, this is a really difficult time for me. So I know that I might be a little bit, you know, more irritable with you, but just know that I love you and it's coming from a place of my own stress, but we'll be okay. It's reassuring them as well. Okay. So kind of what I said before, how do we engage them in these conversations? Instead of just saying, oh, how was your day today? I want to practice kind of like open-ended questions. This is what I use with my kids when I am talking to them about difficult things. I don't want to give them an answer right away. I want them to find it themselves, right? Going back to those problem solving skills. So we ask open-ended questions to lead them to their own answer. So, how does it feel? What made it worse? What would it look like if you did that differently? What do you wish you would do? Kind of things like that will help your child to get to their own answer in their own way. Okay, and then another thing is responding to their answers. So these are easy tips to kind of, if you're taking notes, write this down. The big one, first one is to listen to understand. I'm gonna say that again, listen to understand. Because as humans, it's very natural for us, for when someone is saying something to us, we already have in our brain, like, oh, they're trying to say this because of our own biases, our own experiences. But it's really important that you actively listen to your child and do not interrupt them when they're talking, okay? Really try and listen to the words that they are saying without your own judgment. Okay, and second step is to acknowledge that they're, so if they come and they tell you about something that happened at school, you can say like, oh, that must have been really difficult. Oh, wow, that's awesome. I'm so proud of you. You must have felt really proud, because we want to enhance their knowledge of feeling words as well. Because again, that's not something that we were taught. So being able to acknowledge their feelings after they tell you that story is very, very vital. And then compliment them, right? In their efforts to trying to solve the problem, even if it didn't go well, you know, like even if it was a really, really bad thing that happened at school, they got in trouble, just be like, hey, you know, like know that this is not a good thing, but I'm proud of you for telling the truth. Or I'm proud of you for being able to get through this really difficult time. Like complimenting their efforts as a child is very vital as well. And always reassure them that you are there to support. So even if they did a terrible thing, reassuring them at the end, saying, you know, I'm not gonna lie, I'm really mad at you, I'm very disappointed, but that does not mean that I don't love you. That is key, because these kids, when they feel parents like disappointment or anger, they're like, oh my God, my mom's gonna kick me out, like they don't love me anymore. Like they say this and they jump to those conclusions. So always make sure to kind of reassure them, to be like, this does not mean I don't love you. I'm still your mom, I'm still your dad, and I'm still here for you, and we will get through this together. And then, the last point is to ask them what they want from you. So sometimes kids just want you to listen without any input. Sometimes they want your advice, and then you can go ahead and put in your advice. And sometimes they just want help. So those are kind of 4 things that I teach my parents, is when your child is going through something difficult or you don't know what they need, ask those 4 questions. Do you need me to listen? Do you need me to help? Do you need my advice? Or the last thing is, do you want space? Okay, and we're not gonna watch this video today. The slides will be sent over to you, and you can watch this kind of on your own time. But it's a good video on, you know, a parent's guide to fostering resilience in their child, kind of an overview about what we've already been talking about.
Having resilience is so important.
Okay, and then this is just kind of, it'll be in the video as well, resources on how to kind of build your child's resilience. And the website will take you, once you click on the video, it'll show a little bit of this at the end. So this is a good resource as well. And then how to seek help. So working with mental health professional. I tell my kids, you know, getting therapy or working with like a therapist, it's a little bit like dating sometimes where you might not find the right fit, and that's okay. You can look for somebody else that understands the right. The first therapist might not be the therapist for your child. But by building up their skills and tools to know how to really utilize therapy to their advantage is it'll help their chances of being able to feel connected to that therapist as well. So these are kind of ways, you know, being able to tell your child like you're in the like first in this session, like you have the expert knowledge on yourself. The other people are there to just kind of help ask the right questions to get it out of you. All right, so we're near the end. Here's just very kind of two very good and you know, quick resources for you to jot down. The OC Links phone number and OC Warm Line. If you write these numbers down, save them on your phone numbers. If you are ever in need of mental health support or need assistance getting connected to a provider, this is the number to call. They're very helpful. So there's that on that slide. And that's it.
So I'll go back to that last sentence, say that we want
Yeah.
to take a picture.
Write this down, take a picture of it. This is gonna be a really good resource for you to use if you don't know where to begin, like in getting your counseling.
Well, I'd like to thank Ms. Crystal. As you can see, she's an amazing social worker. We're so happy to have her at Walker. So we would just give her a round of applause. And then we're gonna open it up right now for any questions that you may have. So if you have any questions, Ms. Crystal's happy to answer those.
Can you repeat the four for communication?
Yes. So it's do you need me to listen? Do you need me to help? Do you need my advice or do you need space? So those are quick, easy kind of things. And if they just want you to listen, even a good tactic that I do with my kids sometimes is I'm listening without judgment. Like act like I'm not here. I put a pillow or like a squishmallow in between us. I'm like, just vent.
Definitely a squishmallow.
So that could be something to like, but those are very effective and it's easy for the kids to understand too. They're like, oh, like, yeah. Can you
And they
just
feel
listen?
a lot more comfortable too, like when they do that, they'll just start talking.
I know that schools have a lot of pressure on kids and it's a fine amount of time. When kids get behind and they have a mental issue and they are pulled out of the full core of that mental issue, are there programs in place that help get them back into school and get them caught up in school, or they just fall behind at that point?
So we have, so if a student feeling hospitalized, then we have resources for, you know, to be what we call home hospital. They have like an individual teacher. It could be independent study for some time, it could be, and then, but whenever a student comes back, we have what's called a re-entry meeting. So it's with our mental health team, so it includes an administrator, a counselor, our social worker, and then we come up with strategies and ways to support that as they transition back to school. So that's always something that we do.
And we do send kind of an email to the teachers saying like, hey, this kid's gonna be out for a bit. Please excuse like any missed assignments or if you can read the grade at a time. Like, and teachers are usually really good at giving them that period if they miss school for.
Anybody else with questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. We'll stay for a little bit before we go back across the street. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.